Tom. How you doing, man? You alright? Okay, so what I'm going to be doing today for episode 4 of my Guitarsplaining series today, brought to you by X Blue, because there's enough to think about for this one without drinking. Hi, Mark. How are you, man? So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about modes, what on earth modes actually are, how they work, why they exist, and I don't just want to talk about it in terms of lead. I don't just want to show you how to like shred with these things. I want to explain how you can understand them, how you can think of them beyond just this kind of funny sequence of notes, how they separate from like your regular major or minor scales, how you can use them to make riffs, how you can use them to compose, as well as just kind of improvising with them. So to begin, well, that's good. That's good, man. Excellent. So I'm going to begin by talking about where these things come from. So modes are very, very similar to scales, but they are much older tradition. Modes come from to go way back to where this all comes from. Modes come from Greek traditions of performing music, but really the reason that we know about them. No caveman riffs for you, Ellis. Actually, that's a lie. There is going to be some at the end, but well, let's see if you'll stick around for that. So, as I said, beginnings in traditional Greek music, going in through to the Middle Ages, where these traditions were kept alive by Gregorian monks. So when you have that whole kind of we have 2 single coils and they're noiseless pickups, so they're like stacked pickups, but you wouldn't understand that, Ellis. So anyway, so that tradition was kept by Gregorian monks. So when you have that kind of Monty Python tradition of that, like Isu Domine, that is all modal, and that's the reason why we have these modes, is because of the church modes from the Middle Ages. Now, they've evolved over a long time. So in the Renaissance, these kind of modes were still developed all the more, and it wasn't until the Baroque era, so we're talking about like the 1600s, that we wouldn't anymore consider these as what mode we're playing, but would think more about in terms of, oh, this is in the key of D major, this is in the key of E minor, and that's still, but even when we do play like the scales which we like to call C major or D major or E minor, we are still kind of playing modes, sort of. So we are going to kind of get into differences between those two. But to get us actually started on playing these properly, we need to know our C major scale, first of all. So I'm starting with C. The reason I'm going to be explaining everything in C is for a very simple reason, and there's no sharps and flats. So if we're playing in C, we go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Or for you, Ellis, 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, 2, 4, 5. So we do that, and as I said, there's no sharps or flats. That's the whole point. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now we call that often the major scale, the C major scale. But the other term for that is the Ionian mode. So the Ionian mode is...
Invest as little as £1 in the...
Excellent. The Ionian mode looks pretty much exactly like our major scale. So we have the root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and then your octave. And when you create that sound, it sounds like what? It sounds like your major scale. So what I've done is, provided that I don't get zucked again because Facebook think that I'm breaking some kind of copyright, I'm going to actually play along to some of these. I'm going to put some backing tracks together, just very, very straightforward ones, so you can hear a little bit of how these scales, these modes, will sound in the context of a actual lead, me doing some riffing over it, some soloing. So we're going to start with C Ionian, which again, some of you might be more familiar with calling it the C major scale, and while it is that, in our headspace of thinking of modes, that's what we're going to call them. We're going to call them the Ionian mode. So it is going to be, well, exactly what you think it's going to sound like, because it's C Ionian. Now, help me out with this, because I have no idea how loud or how quiet these are going to be for you. So if the backing tracks are too loud, or I'm too quiet, or anything else, just let me know. So. point. It's a very happy major sounding scale. It doesn't. That's you've all played the major scale before. You all have an idea of how that rolls. So there's nothing really that separates this scale, or this mode, the Ionian mode, from the C major scale, which you probably already know. But it's important to understand it because it's where we're going to begin, and it's one that you're familiar with. And again, the big thing to remember is, as I said before, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. There are no sharps, there are no flats, there are no accidentals. We have all natural notes. So I'm not going to stick around for this one for too long because of that we all know it. But to explain what we're going to be doing as we explore each mode, a mode is essentially, if we think about a C major scale, we start from C and we end in C, root to octave, and in that order. And when we do that, it sounds like that. It sounds happy, and it sounds what eventually got agreed as the major scale. But if we play that same order of notes, so remember all sharps and no sharps, no flats, C to C with no accidentals. What if I went from D to D? Now that's going to have a different sound, even though it is the same notes. Context here is everything, because I'm going to go, which is going to have a totally different sound. Now before I do that though, I am going to I'm going to show you each scale as I go along, each mode. Sorry, that's a bit of a terminology fail on my part there. And I'm going to show it in what are the 3-note string scales, because they're the fun ones to shred on. So on E, we're going to go 8, 10, 12, then 8, 10, 12 on A. So 8, 10, 12, 8, 10, 12. Then 9, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12 on D and G. So that's about an octave and a half so far. And then last of all, we're going to go 10, 12, 13. We're going to do that on B, and we're also going to do it on high E. So we get the following. So we start, so C, and we keep going onwards, and we kind of end halfway through, because that's kind of the limitation of the position. That very super happy power metal stuff, we're going to use this mode if you ever want to sound like, say, Halloween. And this is what I would call a major mode. By that, what I mean is that if you play using this mode, it's going to sound happy. So moving swiftly on to one which is probably less familiar territory, I've just played D to D. Now those are the same notes as the major scale. But when I start from D and I hit all the natural notes, then it has a different sound to it. It sounds a lot more minor, kind of. What it doesn't sound like, it doesn't necessarily sound sad. What the Dorian mode does, the Dorian mode, it's a minor sounding key. Which means if I was to play this mode, but it has a slightly brighter, a kind of cooler sound to it. I guess you might want to say jazzier. I'm not sure if that's always the case, but one of the most famous instances of this mode being used is in a piece by Miles Davis called So What, which goes like this. So you can see how that doesn't sound minor in that it's not going to do very well if you're playing DSBM or something where you have to be that level of gloomy, but it does have a sort of minor tonality which we sometimes sort of approximate with jazz. The other place where you hear this mode a lot is in, to go back to the whole medieval Gregorian kind of thing, a lot of like high fantasy kind of soundtracks and stuff will use Dorian, because it gives this, it's minor, but it has that kind of sense of wonder, and again we connect it to that whole idea of the of the lawsuits, of course. So, I mean, to use one example from, basically because a lot of these I'm going to just pull out video games that I like. So, the game Crusader Kings 2, the theme tune to that has... And that sound is defined by this particular note, because otherwise it just seems like the natural minor scale, the regular minor scale, or which is another mode in itself, but we'll get to that later. But that a lot of you are probably familiar with already. But when you sharpen that note, because that note technically is from what we could have it as a note from a D major scale. With that sense of wonder. Sure, there's a bunch of Skyrim kind of things that do that. The other one that straight away comes to my head is the intro. It's a bit of an old school one, but the intro to Castlevania 3 on the NES. That or well, there's a riff in that same. But you see that a lot in like 80s heavy metal or just hard rock. That's that kind of sounds, the Bill and Ted sort of kind of chord progressions. If I was in the minor scale, then it would be a lot sadder. Which again is more that kind of typical, I guess, metal sound. But then, so now what I'm going to do a little bit of kind of an improv. I'm going to show you some riffing and some soloing over that mode, and you'll see how that differs. So, D, Dorian, go. So, I'm going to start with a little bit of riffing over it and show you how I might kind of do that. Do trap to use these techniques. It kind of reminds me of that, like that one era of like instrumental guitar music, that Satriani early vibe, sort of fusion meets rock meets kind of glam metal. that era which you either love or absolutely despise, and unsurprisingly, I am definitely in the former. And yes, Billie Jean is one which has that as well, and yeah, no, Black Betty does as well. No, you're absolutely right. Oh, also, Ellis, happy birthday for tomorrow. I did not realise that, but my mouse hovered over your thingamabob. So yeah, yes, Song of Storms, of course, because you have the whole. Yeah, all that major 6 creates that sort of bigger, more expansive kind of sound, hence a lot of the stuff which wants to sound epic. I miss you too, man. It's been well over a decade now since we were absolute like degenerates drinking extra strength cider in Camden Lock, and now I'm drinking 0% beer in my house, or my flat I rent. In a quarantine. Woo! So that's the sound of Dorian. Now, the way that I'm going to demonstrate this for you guys, at the very end of this, I'm going to link a video of my good friend Shoy Sen, a fellow De Profundis guitar player who really, just like yesterday, did a video on modes and other ways to kind of think about them, because there's a lot, like what we're talking about today is really scratching the surface of all the kind of modal stuff kind of out there. So when I'm playing this, I'm going, if I'm in this particular 3-note per string position, which you can do all the widdly in, so E, 10, 12, 13, then 10, 12, 14, 10, 12, 14 again, so then another 10, 12, 14, then I'm going to go 10, 12, 13, 15, 12, 14, 12, 13, 15, I'm all that Beck zero is getting to my head, so but again, the cool thing about all this is what I just played, the actual sequence of notes, that's not a new scale, that is exactly the same amount of sharps and flats that I played when I was playing in C Ionian, C to C. Now it's the same notes but D to D, and that shows how important context is in music. Like, I always compare music to language. I always compare like music theory to language, and it's just like if you take a sentence like "that went well," that can be used, especially the way that we as a nation like to use sarcasm. That can be put in a bunch of different ways. Right? If I came out of this and everyone learned a lot of cool stuff and I came out and that went well, that'd be great. If I got doxed by, I don't know, our Fathers for Justice still around, I don't know, ISIS, all these guys are like semi-defunct, and you know the quarantine hasn't affected hasn't done very well for these people's business, but I don't know, if I got raided and that went well, that'd be sarcasm. And just like that, a sequence of notes which sounds Ionian, sounds major over one chord pattern, over one key, can sound very dark. And speaking of dark, we're actually going to get into all the metal stuff now, because after that we have E to E. So if I have a feeling that for the people watching who aren't that familiar with modes, this will be the mode that you're very, very much familiar with, because this is the metal mode. This is the mode that basically gave Metallica a career, and it's the Phrygian. So when we go from E to E, again, no sharps or flats. So E, F, G, E, what? E, F, G, A, B, C, D, and E. We have this sound, which is really defined. Again, just like how now this is another minor sounding mode. But whereas with the Dorian mode, it looked like your regular minor scale, but with that 6th note being sharpened. In this case, it looks like your minor scale, but with the 2nd note flattened. Hey Mark, how you doing? So when you have that, then this gets used in 2 places a lot. First of all is flamenco. So I'm not going to attempt to play flamenco on a Fender Strat, but that sort of vibe. But the way we're all familiar with it is more stuff like this. So first I'm going to do a bit of riffing over E Phrygian. So some of the stuff about down picking from last week will come into play here. So let's see. It's my boy. There it is. we can talk about which do this. Honestly, Tom, I was just flexing to show that I could talk about stuff while playing. But no, as I was saying, like all those kind of riffs, it's that really typical like Bay Area kind of thrash metal sound. That the first riff in Symbolic is D Phrygian, yeah. Because, well, I'm gonna play it in E Phrygian because of my tuning, but yeah. Chuck was a funny one for this because Chuck is someone who came from a background where he had no music theory like understanding whatsoever. So he would say that he made up his own scales, that he made up his own modes. However, in actuality, because there are only so many notes in Western musical tradition, whether you're playing death metal or classical or pop or whatever, he did actually end up using the Phrygian mode a lot. He also used something called the Phrygian dominant, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later on. He would use the Locrian, which is one I'm going to get into in a moment as well. So that's which is why even if you don't have an understanding of music theory, Imperium, it's in a very, very different key. It's been a very, very long time, Stephen, but it's not like something like that. I haven't listened to that song in a long time, but it sounds a little bit like that, I think. You did a piano cover it back in the day as well. That was really cool. I always like seeing like kind of riffs like on a guitar being transferred into another instrument. And likewise on guitar, like seeing like saxophone solos or keyboard solos or violin kind of etudes being played on the guitar. There's all sorts of new kind of creative ideas that you can do when you take something out of its comfort zone, if you will, and put it into somewhere new. There's all sorts of kind of fun stuff that can come out of that kind of experimentation. So yeah, I mean, obviously all these riffs that we've mentioned, all that kind of fresh kind of stuff, again, that flamenco sound. It's pretty much a safe bet. And if I wanted to do leads in it, then obviously there's a lot of kind of room for stuff like that as well. Actually, Ellis, thrash is death metal for old men. Anyway, so that's the sound. That's the sound of Phrygian, and so again, we're probably seeing that some of this is stuff that we're already familiar with. Because so far we've seen C Ionian, which we all know as the major scale. We've seen E Phrygian, which most people watching this are into metal, so you're all familiar with that. And then we've had a D Dorian, so that's the only kind of real new one. I never said it was easy, Ellis. Not for you, anyway. But that sounds good, Stephen. But anyway, so the idea is when we're playing this mode that we go in my 3-note per string pattern. We have 12, 13, 15, then 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 16, and then 13, 15, 17. Now, some of you are probably noticing that when I'm whittling over this, I'm not actually staying with these. I'm exploring kind of beyond, and we're going to get into how we do that in a bit. But a little bit more whittling where I stick to this, just so I'm not being extra. Ended on a nice cue. I hit that bend on a 2-minute mark where I basically just got the drum machine to go plonk. That's cool. That works. So now we're going to get into the real kind of weirdo, kind of muso territory with the next mode, because this mode is called the Lydian mode. And for this next two, I'm going to be explaining a lot more about how we get the tonality with these, because the Lydian is a major sounding mode. We have F going to F, obviously, as we now know. No sharps, no flats, so that's going to be F, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. And while this is a major sounding mode, because we have the major third and major perfect, there's a couple things which give it a certain sense of unease, and the big part of that is that we have this interval. So when we have these two notes together, that's called a tritone or a diminished fifth, which is as dissonant as you can possibly get in Western music. It's the two notes which 6 semitones apart. It's as awful, which sometimes, as we know, is great, as two notes can sound together. But it's in this mode which, when we hear it in context, it's actually a really kind of lovely kind of sound. I'm going to play around with this in a moment, but first we've got to talk about a couple of places we see this. So the guy who really popularized kind of this sound and used it in guitar music is Steve Vai, who, now this is, I used to say, oh, the Lydian is the instant Steve Vai sound mode, but after watching his Alien Guitar Secrets live streams, which are about just right after mine, so you can have a nice guitar double bill and then do your clapping for the NHS, and then that's a solid Thursday night, right? He's just absolutely killing it in these streams, so I'm very reluctant anymore to say, oh, that's how you're gonna sound like that, because it's gonna take a lot more for any of us to sound like that guy, because he is just really is. I wouldn't say a machine, more I think alien is the right word, but it gives that sort of usually hippie, happy, kind of dreamy new age sound that he really, really likes. And the other place where we see that a lot is, we see the scale is with game soundtracks. So for example, first one that comes to mind for me is Legend of Zelda, Kokiri Forest. Ooh, gives it a real kind of nice flavour to it. The other thing that comes to mind off the top of my head, Stephen, you'll probably know this one, is from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, from the episode The Night Man Cometh. There is that one song which your man writes for, yes, so Charlie writes it about the waitress, and he's the little boy and she's the princess, and there's that little boy, tiny boy. I'm not going to finish the lyrics of that one because, blimey, but so that whole... Thank you, Dominic. I just thought I just sounded like some posh British southerner. So that's how we... It's Always Sunny kind of interval. Where else? Oh no, the one which everyone brings up for this mode is The Simpsons use the Lydian mode, which is exactly why that piece. Why, if you've ever tried to kind of learn it, it's one of those. When I was starting guitar, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm doing Mario, I'm doing, I don't know, like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars. But then when it came to The Simpsons, I was like, what the hell is this? How on earth am I supposed to learn this? Because it's just it does look like a bit of a kind of a mess of notes because of the chromaticism created by the sound of the Lydian mode. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do when I talk about this, simply to break up all the tonality jargon that as you probably know now, I like to ramble about, is this backing track I've done for this is in the time signature of 5/4. So I know even numbers are good and odd numbers are scary, so please don't run away. I'm going to explain exactly how this is going to work. So when we're playing in an odd time signature, which is anything with odd numbers, really. What we need to do is we need to understand exactly how to feel this rhythm, because the problem that happens with a lot of people who write bad guitar pro tabs and then post them on the internet, me when I was like 15, the problem with that is people write down time signatures, but they don't understand how that a meter of time signature is supposed to be stressed in a certain way. So, for example, 3/4 is supposed to be felt like a waltz, and 5/4 we can feel almost like a waltz, because one of the pieces of music which really brought this into like contemporary music was a jazz piece by Dave Brubeck called Take 5, which is from the album Time Out, which is awesome. If you've never got into any of like that kind of like jazz before, then check it out. It is genuinely such a good album. But you have this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you can think of it even simpler. You can think 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. A jazz waltz, basically, and it's that time of the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play over a backing track using that, and it's going to get a bit prog, so sorry Alice. That is, of course, if I can find the bloody backing track on my Google Drive, and I can. So here we go. Here's a bit of 5/4 riffing, and then a little bit of lead playing as well. I'm going to do my best Steve Vai impersonation and fail miserably. Now to explain what the hell was going on there. So, as I said, that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, or if you're writing a riff in that, you could think 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and feel it like that as well. Now, if I were to string it up, then I would do it like this. I would go 13, 15, 17. Don't worry, I'm going to go down the octave after this one. So 13, 15, 17. Then I would go 14, 15, 17, because again, we have that sharp. Thank you, Amy. So we're going to have that sharp 4, which is what separates your major scale from, or your C Ionian from your F and minor. So then we're going to have that same thing, 14, 15, 17. Then 14, 16, 17. Then we're going to take that same position up but 1 fret, so 15, 17, 18. And then 15, 17, 19. All that kind of sound. So if you ever want to find how to get like as close as one really can to that, and another guy who used that relatively frequently is the guitar player Neil Zaza. Anyway, so now that we've gotten into that, we've gotten into one of the more, well, I think a lot of the time when people talk about modes, they have this stereotype of like prog, but as we've seen, if EastEnders is actually I don't know how serious that is, but technically the EastEnders is in Ionian, so just a regular C major scale. Although let's put it into Phrygian. So what I'm saying is, let me write the next Skatushka album. But yeah, so that's. But again, that's the funny thing. If you take that might seem like a shit post, but actually, if you take the notes from EastEnders and you start from E rather than C in the same scale, that's actually how it's going to sound. So that's the cool thing about modes. It's not really like the stereotype about stuff like this. That is some like completely advanced kind of like algebraic, bizarre like prog nonsense, and it's not. It's all about context, and just this is, we have not at any point come out of our C major scale. We're being kind of fancy with it, but this is all just the same notes from the Ionian mode that we started with. So this takes it onto G Mixolydian, and with this one I'm going to talk a little bit more about some easy ways that we can incorporate these into our playing, which is a little bit of a prequel to next week's video, which is a bit more of a special one, which I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. So what's going to happen with this is we are now in G. So G. Anyway, so sounds like the major scale, so there's definitely another major kind of sounding mode, but we have this flattened 7 at the top. And this is really cool. So this is called the Mixolydian mode, and it's a mode that, despite its mouthful of a name, is one that we hear a lot more than we might expect. This is very much the sound of, if there was a blues mode as opposed to a blues scale, this would be it. This is the sound as close as you get through modal music to the blues, and I'm gonna show exactly how that's gonna work. But we have, but this note gives it the sound of a dominant 7th chord, and that's why this kind of sound is so bluesy, and as I'm going to show you in a moment. But that's not the only place that you have it. I was thinking just before this of, one moment, Beck's break. Anyway, I shouldn't be leaving it out in the sun, it's getting warm. So with Tom, Sheza, if you're still watching, then I was thinking of, there's that tune from the IT crowd when they had the alternative 999 phone number, 0118999, but that tune is actually it's actually in this mode, G Mixolydian. One band who uses this mode all the time is actually Iron Maiden. Like all the Maiden songs which sound kind of major, they're not actually in a major scale, but they are in your Mixolydian mode. So you take Mixolydian or clairvoyant. Mixolydian. The other, this is something that we hear in Glenmorangie. That's more like it. None of this 0% fret widdly muso nonsense. So the other place we see this a lot is in a lot of like classic rock music. This is like any Queen fans will recognise this kind of sound because this is something that Brian made us all the time. So Hammer to Fall is one that does something like this. Or Free, all right now. That sound is, no, I do know what you mean, Dominic, because it's been used kind of so so much, and with your kind of dominant chords, there's so much kind of weirdness you can get away with, which you can't get away with on any other chord. So no, I definitely know what you mean with that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna improvise a little bit over this, and what I'm gonna do to start with, rather than any more of this kind of 3-note string nonsense, I'm gonna start with something which we all know. So the G minor pentatonic scale. Now, straight away, this on itself isn't going to work because the blues you can kind of get here. That's a minor third. So I'm going to go up with that. I can also go with resolution here, and then just like the Dorian mode, one thing that really can this is to say sharp six. Oh, another song that comes up to my head, just thinking of Mixed Legend, is Girls Aloud, Love Machine. So yeah, that's a throwback to 2005. I didn't think I'd be having this evening, but yeah, there you go. So anyway, without further ado, here's a bit more whittling, but well, here we go. Once it loads. But you see how a lot of that was kind of, it was more ZZ Top than it was Dream Theater, because it works so well off that. And yes, off the top, yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I'm pretty certain that Cult of Personality. For a moment, I wasn't sure if it was Dorian or Mixed Legend, but no, I'm pretty sure you're right. Yeah, I couldn't, but I like to do that in that kind of bluesy kind of sound, going between that. Bending up to that, creating that sort of that dissonance, that dirt, because again, that's the cool thing about this kind of stuff. These rules can be broken, but if you know the rules already, you can break them better than if you're just kind of coming into it from out of nowhere. So this next one is Bex, I know this is a tough time, but if you need a sponsor for your blue range, then yeah, go for it. Right, so the next one, Aeolian. So a lot of you will already know this as the natural minor scale, but so I'm going to show you some other kind of stuff about it, but I am going to play about in it. Oh, hang on, G Mixolydian. So as I said, I've just kind of pulled it out of like the minor pentatonic scale, but if you want a 3-note string scale for this, 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, then 4, 5, 7, then 5, 6, 8, then 5, 7, 8. 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, 4, no, 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, 4, 5, 7, 5, 6, 8, 5, 7, 8. Yeah, well, that's exactly what my old teacher Keith West used to say, kind of to me. It was like, learn the rules and then throw the book away, because when you have that knowledge, otherwise you'll do again the mistake that Chuck made. I mean, obviously it doesn't matter because he made so much amazing kind of music, but a lot of times he thought he was kind of breaking those rules. He was just doing the rules. So it's that whole thing again about music theory being like grammar. It's descriptive. It's rather than saying you have to do it like this. It's like, oh, this is what you're doing. And just like how linguistics allows space for colloquialisms, so does music theory allows space to wreck it. So, which is why so much of the music we like is allowed to exist. So now Aeolian, so natural minor. So I'm going to do so for those uninitiated. So the A Aeolian, which we sometimes just refer to as A minor, and I'm going to talk about why we kind of confuse those two sometimes. I had a wait, hang on. Might be out of. Oh, are we out of luck? Why can't I find my lovely super cheese metal Aeolian mode folder? Hang on. Oh, there we go. Nope. You're all in luck. You get to hear me basically do my little maiden worship bit. I was looking forward to this part because it's at 200. That kind of steel, or that kind of, well, you can kind of, depending on how you tremolo it, it's doing my head in this, I'm going to be wearing shades next time. So, depending on how you play that, you can either find yourself doing it in like that kind of old school kind of sound, or like playing like a black metal kind of thing, like a thrash metal sort of sound. There's so much that you can do the Aeolian, or just full on power metal, like Scrub like me would often come out with. So there's so many options that you have with that, even though it's kind of old ground. Now, so many of us are familiar with the A minor scale, so I actually want to use this opportunity to talk about other kind of modes, because as I said, I'm really only touching the tip of the iceberg with this video. Modes exist way beyond like Western musical boundaries, because just they exist in so many kind of other worlds. So for example, you have Indian ragas, you have Arabic makans, you have Persian dasgar, you have modes in Carnatic music from Sri Lanka, you have music in Chinese music, in Turkish music, all this Bulgarian traditional music. The idea of a sequence of notes and a different sequence and play from a different note, go up to the top and then back again, will create a different kind of sound, a different tonality. This is nothing new. This is something that has existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so it's very hard for us to talk in great detail about those on guitar, of those outside of Western tradition, because not all of these traditions use the same notes as us. So there's only so much, for example, of like an Arabic scale that you can play on the guitar, because the guitar isn't tuned to accommodate some of those notes, what we call multitones in Western music. But what I am going to show you is a mode that you can get away with, and it exists within this. I absolutely love this mode. It's called Hirajoshi mode, the Hirajoshi scale, and this comes from traditional Japanese music, and it's got the notes from the Aeolian, but you miss out a couple, and it creates this really cool music that we'll associate straight away with music from Japan. So but to start with, because I'm running away with myself already, I'm going to get into what notes we're playing in the Aeolian. So we have in A 5, 7, 8, then 5, 7, 8, 8, 5, 7, 9 on D, 5, 7, 9 on G, so far. Then on B 6, 8, 10, and then 7, 8, 10 on high E. Aeolian, but so there's this. The Marty scale is definitely, like Marty Friedman does this mode all the time in so much of his work. I think one of the earliest examples of him using it is, ironically, in the Cacophony track Ninja. So it starts on the root note. You leave out the fourth, and then you hit the root. And so that's just one octave. And when you go up, see how that has that root. So I'm gonna go over that backing track again. This time I'm gonna use it in our Hirajoshi mode, and it's gonna create a very, very different sound to it once I've figured it out. Again, it has, like, the whole point of the pentatonic scale is that to get rid of some of the notes which you feel are unnecessary to leave one's full effects, and kind of that's sort of what we're doing here. We're leaving out certain notes from our Aeolian mode, our natural minor, and in doing so it creates a different sound altogether. So it's what actually, rather than being what we change, it's what we take out which kind of embellishes it. So this leaves one more mode, but then there's a couple more things, and this is where we're going to get real caveman. So I'm going to turn the gain up on this thing, and I'll get my shades out, which I'm definitely getting next time. But for now, so B lock root. So when we go from B to B, it's probably the darkest sounding combination we have. Because not only do we have that flat second, which gives that kind of metal sound, but we also have that diminished, that augmented fourth. It was an augmented fourth in Lydian because we took four. It feels like note 4 being sharpened. In this case, it's note 5 being flattened, so we call it a diminished fifth. So that's why when we talk about augmented fourth versus diminished fifth, they are exactly the same thing, just in a different context. So this sound. So I'm going to start the other way around now. I'm going to go, so let's go 7, 8, 10, 7, 8, 10 again, 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 10 again, and then for the next two, 8, 10, 12. And when we play this mode, well, I'm going to play it over. So here's again a lot less pretty than some of the other ones, but that's what makes this scale great. So it's mode, not scale. So without further ado. The Chad of the riff to 50 angry react. That's amazing. That's amazing. It kind of is. So, but now to take it full circle, here's what happens when. But actually, it's. You can also think of it as George Michael, that whole run up. So it does exist kind of outside its usual kind of angry reactive natural habitat. But before I kind of explain about what's going to be happening next week and how this is going to touch into next week's stuff, I'm going to show you how you can take this full circle. So again, that definitive Kyle of the mode family, I'm going to take that and I'm going to warts and all, and I'm going to put it back over where we started, because we've gone back up to the octave now. We've gone to C Ionian. So I'm going to take this big beefy caveman mode and see what happens when I put it over C Ionian. About context in music and how these modes tie into kind of our definition of scales, because of the fact that your Locrian B to B is the same notes as Ionian C to C. If you are playing over a bass line or a chord progression which is based around C, around C major, then those ugly Locrian kind of scales Locrian licks will sound happy, and the exact same thing is going to work vice versa. If I'm playing over one of these riffs, it's going to sound filthy, because no matter what scale we're playing, no matter what position we're playing on something on the guitar, what really defines the sound of something like this is what's going on underneath the actual rhythm. And that's something that I really try to apply even when I'm doing my own most kind of widdly kind of playing. I'm just thinking what's going on under the parts, because that's what makes all that kind of stuff special, what's happening underneath, which I don't really like just playing over one chord, because there's only so much that you can do. There's only so far that you can go. So next time it's going to be a special one, so I'm going to explain it in a moment, but I'm going to be talking in part about how you can incorporate these kind of ideas and basically talking more about improv, more like cross genre, so not just talking about metal, but talking about lots of kind of stuff. And the reason this is going to be a special one is because I'm doing it in conjunction through Hotbox. And what mode is Baker Street? Well, off the top of my head, now it's a little bit hard to say because we can't hit a 6. It's going to be either the Aeolian mode or the Dorian mode, because I reckon, considering that sort of sound, I reckon. I'll do it in the right key. If I was to improvise around that idea, I probably wouldn't go. I'd go. Because it's just a bit more fitting. So yeah. So anyway, prefer to think of modes as extended arpeggios of what chord is underneath, like the Phrygian is. Yeah, I do get what you mean. Yeah, because the underlying chord really does, and each one has like a corresponding 7th chord. Okay, so before I go, I'm going to explain. Next week, I'm not actually going to be streaming on Facebook. I'm going to be doing this on YouTube. In fact, now that I've managed to get this whole OBS streaming thing, thanks so much to Nina from Lowen for helping me out figuring this kind of stuff out, because I am very technologically stunted when it comes to stuff like this. But what I'm going to do is upload this to YouTube afterwards, and next week it's going to be a YouTube stream with Hotbox in association with charity War Child UK. So what War Child are doing in this coronavirus crisis is that they are providing more support to children in war-torn areas such as Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, Central African Republic, countries which already have a lot of kind of crises, but obviously in countries like that, what they don't have is stuff that we sort of take for granted, like testing, means of social distancing, social security nets for those of us who are out of work, and that's something that they're doing a bunch of like live stream shows to do. So I'm going to be doing a kind of a lesson in association with them. So after this, I'm going to be posting like the campaign page, like the event page for. So obviously, everyone is kind of welcome to come in, but every little donation is going to be very, very useful. Obviously, we've seen that we're all kind of struggling a little bit now, but it's a very, very good cause. So every tiny little bit helps, and you get a free guitar lesson anyway, right? So I think it works out pretty much as a plus. So we're going to be talking about improvisation. We're going to be talking about how to apply this kind of stuff, and unlike this, I'm going to be doing a little bit less of my usual and kind of impression there. But anyway, so we're going to be talking about that in a way that, starting from the most bare basic blocks, not only how you can kind of improvise and compose melodies on the guitar, which is going to sound really cool, but also how you can take melodies and ideas that you like, find what you like about them, and how you can kind of repurpose them in your own material in a way that is still original, that you can still be creative. So, hugs, brothers! What a legend! I would love for him to do a live stream, because I think there's a lot we all need to learn about. Just that dexterity, the way that guy picks with like no scale whatsoever, but still such speed and such consistency. Oh, amazing. Anyway, I need to get going because I got a quiz to do. So thank you so much for everyone kind of who watched. I hope that modes make a little bit of more sense after me rambling about them for an hour. If you have any questions about them whatsoever, then please direct them to my understudy and secretary, Ellis William Arnott, who is working tomorrow for me on his birthday. He does 17 to 19 hour days for no pay, because that's the kind of swell guy he is. So any inquiries, please do pass them on to him. Anyway, thank you very much guys for watching. Stay safe and keep practicing. If I end this live video now, will it be choosable to save delete it? Yeah, I guess so. People can still probably listen to this. I should probably, yeah, okay, wait. Yeah, sure.